Welcome to Adoptee Thoughts, the podcast where we explore the complex and often untold stories of adoption. I'm your host, Melissa Guida-Richards, adoption educator and star-reviewed author of What White Parents Should Know About Transracial Adoption and its companion workbook. Each week, we'll delve into the nuances of adoption, unpacking the challenges, perspectives, and difficult conversations that come with it. Whether you're an adoptee, adoptive parent, or simply curious about the realities beyond the mainstream narrative, this space is for honest, thought-provoking discussions. We won't shy away from the tough topics because they matter. So thank you for joining in, and let's get into today's episode of Adoptee Thoughts. Okay, so there has been a lot of drama in the adoption community all over TikTok. But there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of concerns, and I don't think anybody really knows the full story. So it's just getting very confusing, and now people are harassing adoptees, unfortunately. In the community, I've gotten several messages. I know several others, several of birth mothers and everything. So I wanted to talk to you guys today to see what you guys were feeling and how this all started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm sorry that it's affecting the adoptee community, because first of all, I don't think that's right. If anything, this should be on me and Ty. I just want to say I'm sorry for that.
You know, to be honest with you, we're upset about that because at the end of the day, you know, we said what we said. There's nothing that we regret saying because this whole thing happened. So
when did this start?
Gosh, probably, I'd probably say January, probably February.
With the one on Instagram first, but like the girl or whatever.
Oh,
the Jenna
I would
girl
say
happened
probably within 2 weeks from each other.
Yeah, it was
one reached out and then the other one reached out, telling us both different things. So at that point, honestly, my things happened. Yeah. So,
and also these people too, they're not giving the full messages. You know, a lot of them are blocking out their responses or only posting some of the messages and not all of them. So people aren't really getting the full scope of things.
We have definitely enough through this other social media app that has a lot of the.
And I saved all the Jenna text messages. I never deleted any of those or anything like that.
Would you be willing to share them?
I think at this point, stuff's already out there. I think the problem with this whole thing was that, you know, me and Kate decided we were done talking about our biological daughter, about her adoption, about our relinquishing journey, about all of this stuff. So this really puts us in a really unfortunate space because we're almost forced to break our own vow to not talk about it anymore because of all this stuff coming out.
Specify the supposed mistreatment.
The thing that bothered me the most was just when the girl was saying, she really wants to have a relationship with you, her mom, and her just got in a fight because she wants to see her siblings and she wants to talk to you guys, but in her home, she's not allowed to even speak about you guys. She's not even allowed to mention her sister's names, but she really wants to get in contact with you. That's what kind of made me nervous, because I'm as an adoptee, then she's just being forced to pretend it never happened or never existed. That's not healthy.
And then also they were telling us things about the religion and how the women are meant to get married very early and have children really early as possible, and that they're not supposed to associate with people that are like me and Kay, I guess.
But I can just imagine, I can try to put myself in her shoes. And if she was told, you can't even mention your sister's names, you can't even mention your birth parents' names, can't even talk about being adopted. I feel as that would make me feel less than, in a sense. I can't even talk about this part of myself. And for me, that made me scared for her. I don't think would understand why we talked to these people or why we asked questions. I don't think if you're a birth parent, I don't think you will ever understand why. Fully.
If you were a normal parent or a normal adult getting these messages, you'd be like, okay, you said, everyone's common sense is you call authorities, you talk to someone else, blah, blah, blah. But when we know kind of the common situations that adoptees go through and the
birth parents go through,
it's it made it just really more complicated, I feel like, to know what the right decision was.
Yeah. I can understand that. And I know some people are wondering, obviously, Brandon and Teresa aren't really talking to you guys, but did that ever, float through your head to reach out directly to them?
I mean, I can't. I mean,
we're blocked.
Yeah, I have
okay.
I'm blocked from their phones. I mean, and when we were hearing things like some person saying that she didn't want contact with us, but she did with her sisters, like I would reach out to Dawn and I would say like, hey,
this is what we're hearing.
This is what we're hearing. Is does Carly not want any contact from us, but only her sisters? Like, I need some like validation. I need to know what I need to do for her as like the birth parent. Like, I don't want to send gifts if it's too hard for her. I don't want to send, pictures of her siblings if it's too hard for her. And I could never really get answers. That makes that hard because there's a blockade in communication, so it's like, it's hard for me to even get answers of what the right thing is or the wrong thing is right now.
I can definitely sympathize. And even in the best of situations with the most loving adoptive parents who are supportive, there still tends to be a lot of guilt on the adoptee's part. We have our own version of grief and coming out of the fog. So just even saying, oh, I miss my mom and dad, that can be like a trigger that even if the adoptive parents are saying, oh, I understand, thank you for telling me, that child can go to their room and be like, oh my God, I hurt my parents. I should have never brought that up. When society and a lot of other people are saying that adoptees just need to be grateful for their situation. And I know you guys have been recently digging into like all the nuances of adoption. How has that so drastically changed?
I think the more you learn and the more you listen to adoptees, it's changed my thoughts.
Completely, really.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I feel there needs to be lots of change. I mean, honestly, just listening to the adoptees in the community has really opened my mind on a lot of things. A lot of things that I did not know.
Yeah, and I think when we first got into like the whole adoption thing is that I think open adoption is sold in a very specific packaging. When you're 16, it just seems so, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this sounds great. Oh, yeah, it'll be sad, but we have this. So
they told us that we were going to have, all these visits and pictures and letters, and it's healthy for the baby to have openness. And
I think the first time that we actually realized after, post-placement was when it was months later and we asked if we could know what their last name was. And they were like, no, pretty much, no, you can't know what our last name was. And me and Kate,
that's when we were like, what?
We looked at each other and we were like, well, I never even thought to confirm. It was just really like, that's when we first were like, whoa, this is a little bit different,
Not what I thought.
Yeah. So I think open adoption looked a specific way when we first got into this, and then very quickly, I'm talking months after placement.
Would you say that you were under the impression that they had to do visits and let you contact?
I think we knew legally, yeah.
I mean, I think for us being young and stuff and just coming from the chaos that we were coming from, and we were looking at these two adults sitting in front of us, I didn't think that they would lie. I didn't think that they would not keep these promises. I didn't, I was just like, of course, yes. Oh, you say you're going to do that? I'm taking your word. Like, I don't know, just being like really young.
Naive. We're just naive. I mean, when you have these, and especially like Kate said, growing up the way we grew up, adults like her parents were just unheard of. We never saw any well put together adults like that who, spoke really well and just, had success. So when they're telling us kids, we're looking up to them like, wow, like, this is I wish they were my parents. Like there's no way they would lie.
A topic of conversation that is coming up about this and like moving back to like the open adoption aspect is that people are saying you completely understood, especially since you had to go through the guardian ad litem.
The guardian ad litem was only for terminating parental rights. The guardian ad litem did not go over anything about adoption, didn't mention the word adoption, didn't even get anywhere involved with our adoption plan at all. The guardian ad litem was only there to explain and represent Kate that she was terminating rights. And that's it. And I think people get it confused thinking that the guardian ad litem was explaining the adoption contract to us and going through what adoption is going to look like for, you know what I mean? But it had nothing, they had nothing to do with it.
So what happened was we showed up to the courthouse to terminate our rights. And so the court was like, well, we're going to give you this guardian ad litem who will be like your guardian for like 24 hours or something. And so literally we went in a room. She's like, all right, this is what you're doing. You're terminating your rights, yada, yada, yada. And I said, yep, that's what I'm doing.
During that time, did anyone from MTV, any of the adults in your lives try to help you in your home life?
No. I think the only person that really helped me the most was Tyler's mom. She would, you know, like if I called her and I said I need to get out of here, she'd come pick me up. I was, you know, she would let me stay at her house. Like, if anything, she was the person who like saved me from my situation a lot.
But even then, you know, when you mentioned that about, you know, everyone, I think it's interesting because everyone will like, you know, will clap their hands and applaud and praise, you know, Catelynn for doing what she did. Because she said, oh, there's no way you could have raised a baby in the environment that you were in. You know, no child deserves to be in that environment. And yet alone, she was a child in that environment. And so, you know.
After they got my baby, I was left in that environment. Go back
to, you know what I mean? It's just,
very, so it's crazy.
It was very clear that you guys were not in stable homes. That wasn't a secret. Everybody knew that, and it was ignored. And even to this day, it's like, well, if she had kept the child, then, you know, she would have been in that horrible situation. No concern for you guys whatsoever. So that's just like another nuance to the story. And as birth parents, one, going through the relinquishment, making that decision is very difficult. My birth mother, she placed me and two other sisters of mine for adoption, and she wasn't explained anything, and the baby was like taken from her immediately. And these types of things aren't uncommon. This is why a lot of birth parents are starting to share their stories about what actually happened. There's many news articles in different places where like adoption agencies had to shut down because these huge scandals have come out. You know, international adoptions are closing because of the unethical situations and the trafficking. So there's like a whole wide area of this.
Yeah, and I also feel like me and Kate, as far as like the term coming out of the fog for a birth parent, I think it was, for me and Kate, it was definitely very slow. It was like slowly ripping the Band-Aid off really slowly. So I think people get confused that we just all of a sudden came out of this fog, and it was a very, you know, it was a process that we all kind of had to like kind of face ourselves, which I'll be honest, as a birth parent, it's super difficult because you spend so much time after placing glorifying it. It's beautiful. It was the best thing. Yeah.
It still sucks, you know, like to really look at things.
I think when we speak about it, we get pretty, you know, we get vilified quickly by saying that it was hard, or saying that we regret it, or saying that a lot of things, you know. So I feel like, and I think in a subconscious way, we knew that like speaking about it, we have to be nice about it. You know, we have to say it was sad and say the word, but it was the best thing. And, you know,
but also too, I feel like when you're going through the relinquishing journey and making this whole decision for your child, I feel like the agencies very much so kind of like, I feel like you're almost like brainwashed along the whole entire pregnancy. Like, cause they're just constantly beating it in your head of like, you know, you're doing the right thing. You're planning a life for her. Like she's going to have an amazing life, you know. She's going to have a better life without you guys in it because you're planning this for her.
The most loving thing to do is to let go. The best way to be a parent is to not be a parent at all. It's very,
like, I feel like they brainwash you a lot. Like, I swear.
Who was saying that to you? Dawn or just other people?
Dawn, pamphlets that we would get, you know, Bethany would give us pamphlets that would talk about, and honestly, all the stories were really positive because their birth moms saying, we love it. It's so great. We have relationships with them. You know, this is what it looks like. We never heard not even one story of like, hey, this was so hard. It was way harder than I thought. Wish I would have never done it. You know, adoption's closed. None of that stuff.
Or even like if you would have been able to speak to like, you know, parents way along the, like way out of the journey, like, you know, 10, 15 years. Like if a birth mom would have been like, I still carry this sadness with me today. Like, you know, I never thought, like, when I was younger making this decision, I never thought that, like, I guess maybe because I was young, maybe because of what I was being told, I never thought about the sorrow and the pain that you carry for a lifetime. Like that, and I tell Tyler all the time, I go, I don't think that's something that will ever go away. I said, and if there's an afterlife, I probably will be carrying it with me there too. Like, and you know, as I've gotten older, I'm just like, there is beauty to it, but there's a lot of heartache too, and there's a lot of hard things. Like, and why we don't talk about all the hard stuff and only the good stuff is not fair, and it's not okay.
And I also think minimizing any trauma experienced by the birth parents, by the adoptee, is just not helpful. It's not helpful to anybody. So I think we're to the point where we're done doing that. you know, like I think one thing that people get kind of confused about is that, you know, which I heard is pretty common, that post-placement, a lot of birth moms actually get into advocacy work to be a birth mom into place. Like, they get hired by agencies, they get told to go on speaking engagements and tell your story and testimony, because it's so powerful and you're so brave and you're so strong. So, you know, me and Kate spent over a year traveling, paid by Bethany Christian Services to do public speaking events, advocating for pro-adoption, and we had pamphlets that had our biological daughter's face in it, handed out to thousands of people in the audience. And so, and there was, you know, no one ever had an issue with it because we were talking, you know, pro-adoption stuff. So I think that kind of shows the polarity of how you can kind of almost brainwash yourself into healing as a birth parent. Oh, we're going to go and talk about how beautiful it is and testimony. And then also, like, you know, how it's not really the full truth because you're only saying the pro stuff and not the hard stuff. So, you know, I think people get confused, like, well, you guys were so pro-adoption and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I think we were definitely in the fog trying to use that advocacy as a way to heal. And unfortunately, after you learn so much, you can't go back. Ignorance is bliss. So
I think, like, Tyler brought up something too that was kind of interesting about how, you know, birth mothers, when they have children after relinquishing, the statistic of them struggling with like postpartum depression and mental health disorders is huge. And and it's funny because, well, it's interesting to me because after we relinquished Carly, you know, years down the road, we had Nova, and I struggled with postpartum depression really, really bad with her. And then after that was like when my mental health was like at an all-time low. And I remember it even taking me being in an inpatient treatment facility, and we were talking about my relinquishment journey, and it took a counselor to look at me and say, like, that is trauma. You placing that child for adoption is traumatizing. And I remember looking at her, and I never thought of it being trauma until then. And it totally opened my mind up to, like, because like Tyler said, even in therapy, I would say, like, it's really hard and sometimes I'm sad, but she has like an amazing life and yada, yada, yada. And she looked at me and she said, stop saying but. She goes, it's sad. Sit with that. Sometimes it's hard. Sit with that. Don't try to glaze over your feelings. Like, sit with, and I was like, wow, like, it took a long time for me to even realize that it was a traumatic experience for me too.
And that was 7 years post-placement. I remember Kate calling me and saying, our adoption was traumatic. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And she's like, it was traumatic. It was trauma that we experienced trauma. Like, it was, and I'm like, you know, I think it was one of those things where it's like you feel something inside, but you're almost waiting for society to give you the freedom to like say it out loud. And so that was the first time I think me and Kate both kind of like admitted to each other, even 6 years later, 7 years later, that it was devastating and that we were not as happy and you know, feeling great about it as I think we felt like we needed to show the world that we were.
This was more recently when Tyler told me the statistic about, you know, birth moms struggling mentally. And when he brought it up, like, that makes sense. I was like, holy cow, this totally makes sense.
And actually, there was a study I showed her that showed adoptees attempted suicide and then birth mothers attempted suicide, and the numbers compared to normal population who are not in adoption at all was almost identical. Even. And so that was like mind-blowing to me that, wow, like adoptees and birth mothers share the same kind of something. I mean, to have that so close to get together was really interesting.
Yeah, and So when you were in inpatient treatment, that was like the first time a professional addressed you and like clarified that like you went through the trauma and relinquishment.
Yeah.
Did Bethany ever offer any type of counseling services?
I think the only thing they offered was for her to go to a birth mom retreat.
Yeah, but that was separate from Bethany.
But they connected you with it.
Yeah, Dawn did.
Yeah.
She was the one, which I'm thankful for that part at least, because like I learned a lot there, and I still am in contact with a lot of the birth moms from that. But I remember like going through like different counseling, I guess, leading up to her birth, but after her birth, I would have to say it was more or less like sometimes we would have like a barbecue somewhere and there'd be other birth moms there to talk to or whatever, but it was never really like
professional therapeutic. It was more or less like, here's a pamphlet of a birth mom that felt the same way as you, and it just.
Or I met up with birth moms, but then again, even like those birth moms that I would meet with too after the fact, it was all super positive stories, and I was so fresh out of it. I was like, oh, okay, so like all their open adoptions work.
You should feel like this.
Mine's
okay,
probably gonna be okay too. You know, like I never heard anybody have a negative experience.
But you do bring up a good point, Melissa, by saying it took 7 years for a professional to acknowledge that it was trauma. That should be a thing that all adoption agencies tell these birth moms, like, this is gonna be trauma for you and this baby. Like,
I've talked to many birth mothers, and so many have a similar reaction where they'll say, well, I didn't know, and it didn't hit me until like afterwards, and then nobody explained it to me that it was going to be grief. So it's a whole lot of backstory that kind of culminates into where we're at now. Yeah. So I think that's why it's important to address. Hi, Abby.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is Catelynn and Tyler. I'm not sure if you guys.
I know I've talked to Abby somewhere. There's so many social media sites that I communicate people with. Yes. I can't remember which one it was from, but I do remember speaking with you. So it's nice to see you in person.
You as well.
Yeah. So where we're at is kind of we were addressing the trauma of birth parents and how they weren't really informed that they might struggle with depression. It took many years before a professional even told them like relinquishment is a type of trauma that you went through. Like, just sit with being sad. And so as an adoptee, I see that and I hear that, and then I completely understand the desire to reach out to your biological child. And now in a closed adoption, like, your options were very limited, and now we ended up in this very complicated situation where people, like, frankly just expected you guys to just close your eyes and pretend it didn't happen. And it's a lot. Yeah. So before we get into that conversation, Abby, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Abby Hasberry. I am an adoptee, transracial adoptee, as well as a birth mother. I relinquished at the age of about 17. I was pregnant at 16 and relinquished at 17. And I'm also a therapist, and I work primarily with adoptees and birth mothers.
How long have you been doing this work?
About 5 years now. I was a teacher, educator, principal before that, so I had a whole nother life this. But really came to this work because I had people reach out to me and said, like, you're pretty well balanced. How did that happen? I'm really struggling. And I was like, oh, well, I coach. I'll coach you. And then I found out right away that there was so much trauma. So I was like, okay, let's find you an adoption-informed therapist. There aren't many. And so that's why I decided to go and get another degree and become a therapist.
Yeah. It's so difficult, even just for adoptees, to find adoption competent therapists. And I've had many where I'd reach out to and talk to, and they'd be like, one, they'd hear my story and say like, oh, well, cut off your adopted parents. Not a great answer for me. Two, like, well, you were adopted. Like, you have everything you could ever dreamed of. You didn't have to struggle. So it's a difficult area for everyone. And I think that also leads to the confusion, because now understanding that there have been many cases and many opportunities where not only birth parents have been silenced and stopped, but adoptees haven't been allowed to express themselves. And Catelynn and Tyler mentioned earlier that they were kind of concerned for the safety of Carly, and they were hearing things about possible religious indoctrination. And to me, that kind of fell back to where they were saying that Bethany Christian Services had them like sharing their testimony about how adoption was so good. So that kind of seemed like there's parallels there. So like you guys experience like the type, because Bethany Christian Services is a religious organization, and they pushed you into these things, and you guys had pamphlets and all this stuff. So I'm interested in hearing your take at the overview of everything that's happened. We kind of went over, and your initial thoughts.
Adoption is a marketing genius. They have figured out how to make this horrible thing look like a beautiful thing that people want to do. And let's be honest, if they were to say your child is going to have trauma, you're going to have trauma. Birth parent grief is a grief that actually grows, gets worse over time instead of getting better. If they were to tell you that, no one would do it. And so they use religion, they use all of these marketing tactics, we're doing it for love. And one of the things I've always said is I absolutely did not do it out of love. I loved my son, but I did it 100% out of fear. And when you talk to most birth parents, they'll say the same thing. Have you guys heard of the Lynn Zubov study on the preliminary exploration? Yeah, so you've seen that, I think it was 91% of birth mothers said if they had a do-over, they wouldn't do it. So just understanding that grief and that trauma, there has to be ways, and specifically usually religion and Good Samaritanism and saviorism, that really sets that relationship up to keep it being like, this is such a great thing. Everyone is so happy and you're doing the right thing by God. And part of that also is to indoctrinate adoptees into that belief too, because they are also feeling grief and loss and have no way to explain it. And so that a religion is often used as a way to do that.
Yeah. You have a lot of experience in the adoption field, especially personal experience as well. If you had a client come up to you and say like, oh, I've heard some concerning things about my biological child, what do I do? And it wasn't directly for them. The adoption is closed. How would you counsel them in that situation?
Yeah, so I would do that regardless of when I was a principal, I had the same kind of concerns come up. And so the first thing is always to make sure whether or not the accusations are true. And so really doing that investigation. One of the things that I would suggest is making sure that you are protecting your own mental health. And so if that's something that you just don't feel comfortable or have the capacity to go and investigate on your own, finding a safe place for someone who can do that for you. That's number one, is making sure that it's true. And number two then is, again, protecting your own space. Your safe, your happiness, your health is so important, because if it is true, you may be that person that child needs to come to. And so you need to make sure that you are as strong and as balanced and as just having the self-care that you need. So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing is that if it is true and there is an accusation and then some sort of complaint that needs to be made, to make sure that you find a safe person to make that complaint, because you're still the parent. Even if you're not the custodial parent, you're still the parent. And having your name as part of that complaint may do more damage to the relationship with the child. And so finding a way to do that again keeps you safe, happy, healthy, as well as the child, and have a safe space for that child to come to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point when you said, as far as first, I think the reason why we're in this position we're in is because the first step was to verify if anything of this was true. Yeah. Do your own investigation. I think that's where this whole thing kind of came about, because, and we've talked about this, but I am self-aware enough to understand that my desperation for information and my concern for her well-being is what drove this whole thing to go as long as it did.
Yeah, I mean, because when you have somebody saying that, they're close friends with her, that, she wants to have contact, wants to speak to her sisters, but at home she is told, you're not allowed to talk about your adoption. You can't even mention your birth parents' names. You can't even talk about that you even have any biological sisters out there. it made us worried. Like, we need to see if this person is like legit. Is what she is saying true? Because if so, I don't feel like that's healthy for her, you know, especially if she wants it. And I feel like as a birth mom, I was like, well, if she has a safe person that she can go to and say, hey, let my birth mom know today that I'm thinking about her, that I love her, and that I could write back, hey, I love you too. Like, I didn't see that there could be, I don't know, harm in that. I don't know if that's wrong or not. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, but I feel like the internet is making me feel like it's wrong. But I'm like, you know, if all of these things were true and she felt like she had a safe person she could go to get in contact with me and him, I felt like I felt like that was okay. But from a therapist, I want to know your take on it.
Yeah. Bottom line, you can't have too many people love a child. Like, that's just bottom line. You just can't. There's no space to not love children. And so, yes, children need safe spaces. I have a friend her daughter had a who cares list. And so it was a list of all the people who cared. And so those are the safe people who are not necessarily your parents, who you can talk to about things that may upset your parents, that they may not feel comfortable with, or that you may not feel comfortable with. And so absolutely, that is something that I would say every child should have, every adult should have. Honestly, like in a marriage, you have a who cares list, you have your friends, you have your parents, and you want to talk about your spouse. Why don't kids get that same, if they get that same thing, the same safety plan, really?
Yeah, and I think, like, as an adoptee, like, we're often told, like, oh, your parents, they took care of you, you know, like, they're supposed to be, like, the ones that protect you. And, you know, even just, like, regular teenagers, like, going through struggles, you know, emotionally, hormonally, it's a very confusing time. So, to me, it was altogether plausible. And then Tyler and Catelynn, like, you said that they were sharing information that other people didn't know. So that's what, like, really made you concerned, is that other people, like, didn't know, this wasn't public knowledge.
Right, which is why I think me and Kate even continued to talk to them, because we never believed they were minors, because the way they spoke was just too suspicious for us. But we felt the need to kind of play the game to verify if any of these allegations were true, and also to keep them talking. And also at the same time, like, you know, they were just saying certain things that, you know, it was hard to ignore. We knew they were not minors. We just felt that maybe it was an older cousin, an older aunt, someone that was maybe removed from Carly a little bit, that she felt comfortable giving them information to give to us.
Or I thought even like somebody from just their community.
Yeah, like
whether it was somebody from church or something like that, because they knew some things. But then when I would be like, well, I kind of need this sort of proof, or I can't continue talking to you, like the Jenna girl. That's why I quit talking to her, because I was like, now this is starting to feel a little weird, you know, and so I stopped. But even she knew certain things. Yeah. That was just kind of like made me off rip think like, oh, this person is connected somehow, you know? And then I was going to say, even like 2 days after all these messages got leaked, somebody else messaged me on TikTok, pretending to be Carly, messaging me, and I was writing back, but I'm not an idiot. And I was like, well, I don't believe you. I just kept saying, like, I don't believe that you were her, and I'm sorry, you know, that I don't. But like, if you were her, you would be able to tell me A, B, and C, and you can't, so I can't continue talking to you. And so it's like, even those people, I was like, I don't know who I'm talking to, so I can't continue talking to you, you know? But it's just like, I feel like we're getting so much hate on like talking to these two people. And if they were minors, I personally don't think we were not saying anything abusive to them. We were not trying to manipulate them or anything. People saying that we were like grooming these people to talk to us, and it's like, they reach out to us. We were not seeking these people out. They were giving us information. And I think some people are saying that I was grooming because the one person said, like, do you think I should tell a teacher or something? And I told her, I said, no, I don't think you have to. It's because she was messaging me about this Jenna girl that I was talking to on my phone. It gets confusing.
We had two catfishes pretty much telling us contradictory things, and we were trying to verify the information.
So we were telling, so like this quote unquote Jenna girl would message me some things, and this other girl we were talking to, I was like, hey, does any of this make sense to you? And she was like, no, like, who are you talking to? Should I tell a teacher or something? And I said, no. I said, this person she doesn't know too much. I'm like, she's not like endangering you or anything. Like, you're not in danger or anything. Like, I don't feel like it's necessary to tell somebody that I'm talking to this Jenna person, because I'm the type of person that absolutely. If I thought the school was in danger, if I thought Carly was in danger, if I thought kids were in danger, I would say something. I don't think they really understand when you have an open adoption for so long and then it closes out of nowhere and you have no communication. And then you have people telling you concerning things, saying that they're friends with Carly and that she wants to talk to us on their phones or whatever the case is. Like, I don't know, is it wrong for me to say that absolutely I would talk to her on a friend's phone if that's what she wanted? I don't know. It's having a ripple effect on the, in the adoptee community, which is so wrong. Like, just because we invited them on our podcast to share their stories doesn't mean that they knew that we were even talking to these people. Let alone, it's not their fault that it even happened either.
Right.
Like,
I kind of,
the whole situation is crazy.
Yeah, and I also feel like, to go between two different people who had this information, really concerning allegations, trying to go through everything to figure out if any of it was true. It just created this. I think what it comes down to is that, like, I completely understand why everyone is concerned. I completely understand why this looks the way it does, especially considering that this person's not, showing the full messages.
No, only bits and pieces.
And especially considering that this person who's claiming to, defend Carly and protect her and all this other stuff, which obviously we know that's not true, or else they wouldn't be leaking this stuff.
Yeah.
But they would write me saying she's, being controlled and, all this other stuff. And so you should try to reach out to her. And so I would reach out to her, and then she would yell at me for reaching out to her. It was very weird how back and forth this person was communicating with us. And, it made everything super confusing and hard to validate anything. And like I said, I think for me personally, I can take accountability for the fact that my desperation for information and my concern for her is what is the reason why I think my judgment was clouded. I think it was why I didn't kind of use my critical thinking skills and be like, wait, like, and I should discontinue talking to this person until they can confirm that this is actually, they know Carly or all this stuff is true. I think it just created a really blurry line and blurry space to try to navigate. And I feel like on top of it, with the grief of our open adoption closing, I just feel like they were saying certain things that they took advantage of our grief and our concern. And I think they had this plan the whole time to leak all this stuff and make it a big thing. So we unfortunately got catfished by two people, and our concern and desperation is what caused this to happen, unfortunately.
And I think it doesn't help also when I'm reaching out to the only outlet that I have, which is Dawn, and saying, like, does she want contact with us? Does she not? Is it too hard for her to see pictures of her sisters? Is it too hard for her to get gifts from her sisters or us? And you can never get a valid answer. Like, that's hard too, So it's,
I think another aspect here, but you were connected, to my knowledge, to the Lila person by an adoptee who was contacted by that person saying that she wanted to talk to you and she had concerns. So I feel like that adds also another layer here, because you have, like, someone who you're friends with, someone who has been adopted, and they're over here telling you, like, here you go, here's this opportunity. But also, if, like, I feel like if that was me in that situation and I said, hey, Tyler, like, yeah, you should, that would be reinforcing the idea also that, like, oh, the adoptee always wants contact, or something is wrong, something is fishy, because you're talking to someone with lived experience. So that complicates things again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to say, like, the person, that did send us this Lila girl, like, that's all she did. It's not like she talked to her forever or anything. Yeah. She was just like, hey, somebody's messaging me. They know so-and-so, whatever, So it's not like she fed into this. Like, I think people are getting it twisted that she, like, communicated with this person for months or whatever.
She pretty much was just a bridge to kind of connect us. And I think her intentions were pure by saying, hey, I'm an adoptee, and if I was Carly, I would want to get connected with you in this way if it was possible. And so I think her, like, you're right, it confirmed a little more coming from her, and also from this person saying that Carly is desperate to get in contact with you, she wants to talk to you, et cetera, and all this stuff. So it just, it's a lot.
We totally got catfished, and yeah, it sucks. It's unfortunate. It is, you know what I mean? We can take accountability and say it's never going to happen again unless somebody, unless Carly reaches out for herself one day or whenever she wants to. But yeah, it sucks. It's just a crappy situation.
The gossip blogs keep saying like, "Oh, it's been confirmed that Lila, that person is a child, a 17-year-old."
Nobody's confirmed.
And I've heard rumors that like, "Oh, all the parents in this situation have been contacted." Have any parents reached out to you?
No.
And honestly, we still haven't confirmed who this other person is. My theory is that they're both the same people writing contradictory things. They both contacted us around the same time.
Mm-hmm. And then I was getting weird phone calls, like I was telling you, around the same time. Mm-hmm. After I stopped talking to the Jenna girl. Yep. I was telling Melissa that I started getting, this lady was calling me like twice a day saying she was friends with, Carly's mom, and that Carly's mom gave her my phone number to talk to me. And I was just kind of like, well, her mom's an adult, so if she wants to call me, she can call me, or whatever. Like, and then other phone calls, and then no caller ID messages, and then random text messages.
So we realized at that point, okay, our number must have got out, and this is turning into a total nightmare.
Yeah.
It definitely sounds like people taking advantage of your heart, the most important thing to you, your child.
Yeah. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
I think just like giving this information, I think we do need to consider that there is still a possibility that one of them was a child. Mm-hmm. And in that case, we don't know. I don't think we ever really will unless the parent comes out. If the parent, if it is really a child, or if you were to hire private investigators to look into the numbers and messages and stuff. It's a very difficult situation because there is no perfect solution here.
Yeah.
And Abby, when it comes to grief and birth parents going through all of this and contact and boundaries, how does that affect the boundaries of the birth parents, respecting it, understanding it, and what is the ideal option here?
There is no ideal option. We'll start with that. It is all hard, and the boundaries just have to be whatever keeps you safe and healthy. It just has to be that. And so when I think about you getting those first messages and that real strong desire to just jump in and see what's going on, my only suggestion would have been to have a third party do it, because if it wasn't true, and even if it was true, to have that barrier, that boundary between you and that information, you and those people, is so important. Just that grief is just so real, and it really does get worse over time, and that's a fact. And so protecting yourself from that with whatever boundaries you need it's just top priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for myself, I think I've come to the boundary ever since all this happened that you know what, I'm just gonna wait. Either one day she's gonna want contact and she's gonna reach out on her own, whether she's 18 or she's 30 or 40, or she's never going to. I'm just I'm leaving it up to her,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or wants to pretend or whatever, they're getting no response, or I'm just blocking them or whatever. I'm just gonna wait for her.
Yeah, I think it's honestly the best thing that we can do at this point. I think this branch of possible connection, and also maybe possibly helping her get out of a situation that's bad for her, all the stuff that was going through her head. I think we come to a conclusion that I think just mourning the loss of her is super important for us moving forward, and just kind of accepting the fact that she may never contact us, and that I think to kind of let the mourning happen, let the grief just kind of happen, instead of, having that grief kind of be manipulated and played with. I think just accepting it for what it is, and that, ignoring any of the claims that we have. Unfortunately, that is a lot harder to do than it is to say, especially when you're going through grief, and especially when you have people telling you certain things that make you really scared or concerned. And especially, in any other parent situation, getting this information, they have a little control over protecting the child. We don't. And so that's where it gets blurred lines and it gets kind of scary. But I think for us moving forward, we just, it's mourning the loss. And I think continue and just kind of allow the grief to just happen. Instead of trying to look for little, any little scraps that we can kind of get. Because that's obviously didn't help us and it got us in this mess that we're in right now.
And I also think too, like I also think too, like just continuing to work on ourselves as just humans and, learning about ourselves and trying to process our grief and stuff too. So that way, if she ever decides that she wants contact, we can look at her and say like, hey, yeah, we struggled for a few years emotionally or whatever, missing you, but we really were like, I want to be the healthiest version of myself that I can be. So that way, if she ever decides to come back, like I can be a healthy adult in her life.
And realistically, in the life of reunion, adoptees come in and out of birth parents' lives. So they will come in and like gangbusters, and I want to see you and I want to talk to you, and then I want no contact for 2 years. And then I want to come back again. And so what you talked about, Catelynn, and really sitting in and being the best version of yourself, you have to be the eye of the hurricane and allow her to be the hurricane going around you. You have to be the center of that storm and be prepared to let her in when she wants to be brought in and prepared to let her go when she needs to let go.
And I'm sure that's going to bring up a lot of pain.
Oh, absolutely.
Too. Yeah, so
absolutely.
It's trying to process things, while I, start.
But I think it's smart, Abby, that you mentioned that because I think it creates accountability for us to kind of make sure that we still are seeking to have that extra support, that resource, that therapist, whoever it may be, to just kind of have that balance. So that way, even if we're in the middle of the hurricane, we have something to lean on in the middle of it. Because I didn't really think about the fact that they come in and come out, and so that's actually a great point. I think that's something that we'll probably mention.
And it makes sense. I feel like it makes sense that adoptees would be like that because it's got to be hard and scary and sad. It's got to bring up lots and lots of emotions for the adoptee too. It's like, oh, I'm really excited, and then something happens. It's like, oh, why is this hard? Like, I can only imagine. It brings up a lot for everyone involved.
Yeah, and there's guilt too. Like when I was reconnected with my birth mom, like at first I was like super excited, but then like I was hit with all this grief. I didn't know how to have a relationship with her, so I closed her off. And then months later, she's reaching out to the investigator, trying to get in contact, and I'm just like, what am I supposed to say? So it took a while for the relationship to work and for us to like figure out the right balance in respecting each other's boundaries. But I want to kind of veer off to a parallel situation here. In this situation, the rumors and the distraughtness and the frustration has been over the potential contact with a minor from you guys as birth parents. Understandable. If it is a child, we always have to consider that possibility that we would have to say, like, those messages were inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But there have been other situations. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bella Lambert. Her mother, she adopted a child not too long ago, a few years ago, and her mother actually was involved in a situation where she was facilitating messages with a minor, with her friend who was a grown adult. And that ended up going to court. The mother, so the grandmother, the adopted grandmother in the situation, was on probation or some kind of repercussions for that. And yet to this day, I have people coming in the videos where I share and analyze different situations saying this baby has the best life possible. Stop trying to take this away from her. Her mother has nothing to do with her. This is a person who is also in this baby's life every single day. So that's in the immediate circle. And it's interesting to me that that's the response that the public has to an adoptive family. And in this situation, you guys aren't given an ounce of the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I would chalk that up again to the marketing. The adoption narrative is just the strongest narrative, and so adoptive parents get the benefit of the doubt 100% because that narrative is just so strong and positive, and how could it not be a better life when it absolutely isn't a better life, it's just a different life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think honestly, when it comes to I don't know in this situation that we even deserve any kind of grace or understanding. I think it deserves criticism. I think it deserves any of the, it deserves all the negative stuff that's coming to it. I think me and Kate understand that. I think the reason why we're even talking to all you guys today is just to kind of like explain how and why this happened and how it can look to somebody who's not involved in adoption to look completely insane and look completely unhinged and look completely like, whoa, this belongs in some crazy Lifetime movie. But
and then to people involved in adoption, like my birth parents are like, I get it.
Yeah, and so I'm hearing a little difference in like opinions. But I get it. I understand. And like you said, if this is confirmed to be a minor, everything, it was wrong, of course. And I think even if it's confirmed to not be a minor, the fact that we never believed them to be minors was probably our first mistake, because we should have confirmed if they were a minor or not, instead of just assuming that what we believed to be true, which the way they spoke, we just never believed them to be a minor. But like, even if it comes to light that they're not, we should have probably confirmed that they were or not before continuing any conversation. So yeah, I just think the whole thing got so messy, and I think the only way that it got so messy is because adoption's involved. I think if this is any normal situation where, you know what I mean, like a step parent removed and a child trying to get in contact or whatever the case, it would be different. But there's such a murky, gray area here because adoption's involved.
Well, and like Melissa said in the beginning, with adoption, it's either black or white. There is no gray.
Yeah.
And when people look at it, other people that aren't involved in it look at it. But
now, when it comes to this, you guys admitting the mistake, I think that is very helpful to the community, because we know that birth parents are human, adoptive parents are human, adoptees are human. We all make mistakes in these relationships, especially when we all have different types of trauma. We have adoptive parents with infertility trauma. We have birth parents with relinquished trauma. Then adoptees with abandonment trauma, and like all other things. Not to mention, we can go into hours and hours of the risks of mental illness, struggles with different things. But to me, as an adoptee, when I first heard about this situation, I was like, this is a birth parent who made a mistake, and adoptive parents make mistakes all the time. I feel like when it came to it, like, people are thinking this is like the worst thing in the world. You guys should be vilified, come at you like they did in Beauty and the Beast with the with the forks and all that stuff. And in this other situation, like I mentioned with Bella Lambert's family, like they're given the benefit of the doubt. So Abby, when it comes to like guilt and situations where birth parents have overstepped or have made the less responsible choice that could have upset the child, what kind of recourse is that? So like how would you suggest they hold themselves accountable?
I think that Catelynn and Tyler are doing exactly that. They're owning up to their mistakes. They're having absolute accountability for it, apologizing for it, and saying we want to do better. I think that's what we all do. I don't think it's any different from any well-balanced human being. When we make a mistake, we say we made it, we own up for it, we apologize for it, and we do better. I think that's where we are, and I think that is enough.
I mean, I honestly hope that it's enough. I think the biggest heartbreak for us personally is the negative effect that it has had on the adoptee community, because it's something that me and Kate have really gotten so close in and gotten so involved in, and just really gotten so passionate about, advocating for this community. And the fact that they welcomed us as birth parents was, so amazing. And so I think that kind of is the most heartbreaking part, is that this could have a ripple effect, or it has had a ripple effect on the whole community, which is really just the worst part. So I think for me and Kate, all we're trying to do is take accountability for what happened and apologize, and also acknowledge the fact that, I know people look at us in a specific way because we've been on TV. And I think almost, I won't say unfairly, but we've been put on a pedestal in a way. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure and responsibility with the pedestal that we're put on. And so I feel like, obviously with that light kind of on us, that spotlight, a lot of the mistakes get amplified and everything gets blown up. And so that also makes it super difficult. So we're just trying to just do better and kind of move on from this, also learn from it, also get this out there so other people, if there's any other birth parents who find themselves in this kind of situation,
I would do what Abby said.
I think it's important and not to allow your grief or concern or desperation to cloud your judgment and your critical thinking skills. Like, be careful.
But man, it did it to us for sure.
It did, and admitting the fact that we got catfished by two people is just something that we have to come to grips with. And unfortunately, them leaking all this stuff puts us in a specific spotlight that we never thought we would have. And so we're just trying to stand in the spotlight and take the arrows that are being shot our way and bow our heads, I guess.
But also I would have to say, I feel like the people they're very harsh when it comes to like what they're throwing at us. Like you saying that we're grooming kids and all these weird things. I'm like, what? No, not at all. Like, are you kidding me? We have 3 young girls. We are very much like, why we would never do anything like that. And I think it's because, like we said before, they're not getting the full scope of it. And people are blacking out their conversations and only posting what they want to share and not the full conversation that was had.
And I also feel like we've also gotten so much hate as birth parents.
Oh, gosh,
I think, let alone for just talking about our adoption experience publicly for 16 years on TV. Well, I think we get a lot of hate for,
we started talking about it in the not so good light.
Well, we obviously we gotten a lot of hate for, people are saying we're exploiting the situation for financial gain or whatever. And so I think this little situation was the perfect icing on the cake. It was a perfect catalyst for them to be like, and just attach onto this hate. And I think it if anything, it was almost like them saying, "See, I told you," to everyone who hated us so much. It was like they're taking this as their guiding torch. Like this is what we were waiting for almost, because to confirm all the conspiracy theories and all the justify the hate that they have for us. And I think, like you said that before, Melissa, that comes down to we are at the bottom of that little triad. Birth parents are just be quiet, don't talk about your grief. And so I think on top of it, it just adds let's just attack them, it justifies all their hate. So, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you guys said that you'd be willing to share more context with the messages and, records of, all the calls that were harassing you. I think that will do a lot to help with these, red flags that people are kind of, going after and saying that, oh, well, you told a minor to take a picture in the bathroom. Oh, you were talking about parenting strategies and philosophy with a child. That was inappropriate.
Oh, yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like...
that was a question asked to me from that person saying, we're controlled by our parents. Our parents want us to get married and have babies super young and have as many kids as you can as being girls. And so what you're seeing is my response, wow, but yeah.
Yeah. When you think of these messages, do you regret not speaking out earlier, or do you think...
Yeah, I wish I would have, to be honest with you, I wish I would have listened to my gut when I realized this is not a minor. You know what I mean? I should have, instead of being like, oh, well, it's not a minor, but it's got to be Carly's older cousin or an aunt, I should have just stopped right there and been like, just stop. But like I said, when you get constant more allegations, and like I said, there's a lot of times where I actually told them, hey, if this is making you uncomfortable, please stop talking to me. I don't want to hear anything anymore. Because you can't verify who you are and you're making me concerned for no reason. And then a week would go by, 2 weeks would go by, and then they would reach out to me again with this long message saying she's changing over the years. She knows she's hurting. She wants you. And so it was almost like a fishing line, kept reeling it in and casting it back out. And so I think that has to be understood too, that I never reached out to these people on my own. They always would reach out to me. with new allegations or new concerns.
How long after you guys ended contact with them did it take for these messages to be released? Was it immediately? Was it?
I mean, no, with the Jenna girl, I would say it was probably about 4 weeks, probably about a month.
I think even longer with her. I think with this other person,
it was fast.
Very fast.
I think the other person, like, whether
3 days later, I blocked.
Whether they were the same person or different people,
right.
It was like the Jenna stuff got leaked, and then probably like 3 days later, she started leaking all the Lila stuff started being leaked. But then it was like this Lila girl is like leaking like 5 pictures at a time. You know what I mean?
Very
so it's
methodically.
like, so it's like,
and blocking out certain stuff she said and leaving out.
That's why, like, I don't think it's an adult, or I don't think it's a minor, because I'm like, why? And nobody can confirm it. I told when was it Us Weekly reach out to me, or okay?
Yeah.
Us Weekly reached out to me, and I said, if you can confirm.
It was OK Magazine.
Or OK Magazine. Yeah. I was like, if you can confirm that these people are minors, I will totally, give you a comment. Like, if you can confirm that these people are who they say they are, I will totally give you a comment, give you an interview or whatever. I said, but until then, I said, you're just speaking on nothing factual.
Allegation,
like,
speculation. We also told him, hey, if you're going to be a journalist, please do your due diligence and don't spread fake news and try to, like, verify that these people are who they say they are. And if you can do that as a journalist, we said we agree. We will talk about it. We'll share screenshots. Mm-hmm. We'll, you know what I mean? Like, we have nothing to hide.
And then I'm so happy that because they haven't been able to. They haven't even been able to verify it. I'm telling you, because it's been off of different like messaging apps and like WhatsApp, and you can tell it's like, it'll come up and say like, this phone number might be a scam. And I'm like, yeah, they're using like just fake numbers and stuff. Yeah.
And so it has not been confirmed whether or not these are minors that you're talking about.
No.
Then you sharing your side of the contacts is probably not a good idea unless you can confirm that they're not. I would not do that.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, until I can, and I talked to Melissa about this earlier about like, kind of like a timeline of releasing anything. I can't consciously do it unless I know for a fact that this person is not a minor and just faking and pretending to be one. If they're an adult,
I'll put it out there.
I'm almost kind of hoping it does get verified in a way that they are an adult, so I can just be like, this is own up to all your stuff, like I'm doing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I've seen online is by these like gossip blogs and these Facebook blogs saying that, it's been confirmed that it is a minor. It's been confirmed that they did this.
And saying that it's
I mean, to be honest with you though, confirmation has to come with some kind of proof. And all I've seen was that we're confirming it, but we're not going to tell you and dox these people and tell you who these people are, but just trust us. And I'm like, well, how do I trust content creators that make a living off of dissecting people's lives and hating on them and spreading misinformation? How can I trust? You know what I mean? Like, you're not the most reliable source here because, for one, your opinion is very biased. You hate us, and so you're looking for any excuse to accelerate and elevate that hate and expand it. So, until something else comes to light that's not from these creators, then it's not confirmed. And
I do feel that like if this Lila girl was a minor that is close to Carly, and say that her parents obviously would know about it or would have some kind of inclination.
I would love to reach out, please.
No, but I do think that Dawn would have called me.
Yeah,
I know Dawn, and I know Dawn would have said, "Hey, Teresa called me. One of her friends' parents are upset." Then I would know for sure. You know what I mean? But like. And I know Carly's parents. They would call Dawn, and Dawn would call me and say, "Hey, this is what's going on."
And also, if it is confirmed that this other person is a minor, I would like to know, because that way I can do what I have to do and reach out to their parent and say, and show them all the messages that I have and say, I want to be transparent with you, apologize, and just really just explain to them what happened. So like I said, I don't know if or when that'll ever happen, confirming that this person is who they say they are. But whatever confirmation happens, if that ever does happen, I'm ready to jump in and do the right thing. So I think that's all we can really do at this point.
Yeah. What kind of, moving forward, obviously this is everywhere. So at this point in time, like, it's safe to assume that Carly and her family have heard. So I would just like think in that situation that as the adopted parents, I would reach out to my network and be like, did anyone like do this? Like, who did you know anybody? So that's another thing that makes it very sketchy. And a lot of these blogs, like, they're accounts without a face. They're and it's just like a mess that I see that people are. You're not blowing out of proportion, because if it was a child, it is, that's another situation. But
sorry, guys.
Until there's proof, these accusations are like, they are really damning. They could really hurt people. And I've had people in my comments compare it to like grooming and to predators and like sexual abuse of minors.
Yeah, I don't either.
And that takes it to like a whole other level of like villainization and accusations that not only like put you guys and your family at risk, but there are serious repercussions for everybody. Oh, we lost them for a second.
Oh, I'll say too that just on that what we're all kind of forgetting, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, but their grief is what's being preyed upon, and that's just
she's recording
just the worst of humanity, just to prey on somebody's weakest spot in their weakest moment. I mean?
Yeah. And another thing that I would love your comment on is like when we talk about the grief and the taking advantage of, there was like a recent episode of Teen Mom where they were presented with this gift from their daughter, but they were under strict instructions that they were not allowed to view it unless it was on television, and their reactions were recorded. And they had asked, can we listen to it privately before?
Absolutely.
So there seems like there's a lot of manipulation going on that would lead to like a very confusing mental state for the birth parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you saw my reaction when you said that. It's just like, ooh, the imagine to think about being to think about being put in that situation and publicly, and being put in that vulnerable emotional situation for viewership. I can't imagine what mental state I would be in. I mean, I'm much older, 54. I'm a lot older, and I can't even imagine where I would be in that situation.
Yeah, I was just telling Abby about the situation where you were presented with a gift from Carly, and it was under very strict instructions that you decided wasn't healthy for you guys to move forward without looking at it in private. So I feel like that is another aspect of where you guys were in this whirlpool of like manipulation by all sides. It just keeps on going and going.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I think it's interesting because during the time of that whole song and gift situation happening, am I skipping? Am I lagging?
A little bit.
Am I? Okay. We might have problems with our internet, unfortunately.
Hold on.
We're going to try to switch to a different...
Yeah, so hold on. It might pause me for a second.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
All right. Me neither. I have to go get the kids, too. So that's always fun.
Oh, that's right. Wow, we've already been on here. How long? Oh, wow.
Do you have any questions you want to ask, Abby?
I mean, I have lots because being not very on the social media platform, I didn't know any of the situations. So not everyone in adoption land has heard about it, because I did not.
Yeah, that's good.
You're coming at it with very fresh eyes.
Very fresh eyes.
So I have to go pick up the kids from school. But Melissa, too, if you have any other questions for me for this or anything, too, please reach out to me. Tyler can text you my number, too. I don't know why I don't have your phone number. So I'll let Ty answer some of the questions, but I have to go get my kiddos from school.
Yeah, what else?
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
They'll be stuck there forever. Yeah. Is the connection better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we had we live out in the middle of nowhere, so yeah, and it's raining right now, so yeah.
I know you apologized to me because of the position that it kind of put me in. We're me and my friend Paige, an adopted parent, we are hosting a conference, the Adoption Changemaker Conference, and we had asked if you and Catelynn would be one of the keynote speakers of the evening. And
I still feel that you guys add a valuable point of view to this conversation. And to me, adopted parents are, they make mistakes, and birth parents make mistakes. And even if we look at this situation and say it was all true, it doesn't sit right with me to cut birth parents out, because this type of harm isn't okay. It's not okay to talk to a minor. But also, we have to, there's degrees of severity here. And I don't think this is something that you guys can't come back from.
I mean, honestly, I guess for me, my goal isn't to really come back from anything. My goal is just to be transparent and just be honest and just kind of be in a space of acceptance of and accountability of what took place and what happened. And I feel like the only way for anyone affected by this to understand is to just do that and be transparent and honest about what happened. And that it's not all kind of what it looks like that you're seeing online, which is being very methodically released and cropped and all that kind of stuff. So I'm at I'm in a space where it's like, listen, I take full accountability for what happened, and I am deeply regretful and sorry that it affected any of the adoptee community. That's, like I said, that is probably the biggest heartbreak that has come from this, to be honest. So, I mean, for me, Melissa, I reach out to you. I reach out to pretty much anyone I could think of that was been on the podcast who might have heard about this, and I reach out privately. And I originally was not going to mention anything to do with this. I was going to let it go and let them, this being on TV for 16 years, you're used to having rumors about you and kind of conspiracy theories about you. And I was going to let this one just run its course. But once I realized that it was affecting not just teen mom fans, it was affecting people I really care about in a community that I'm very passionate about uplifting and elevating and advocating for, I felt like this interview was necessary. And I think I'm standing by the fact that this is necessary and that I'm here in a way of just being I'm ready to take any arrows that need to be shot, and I'm willing to just bow my head and take whatever comes my way. But I do want to appreciate you for just setting this up and helping us. I think you're the only one that really reached out with kind of a solution-based thing. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to even do this in the first place.
Thank you. I feel strongly that the only way we're going to make progress in this industry is by working together. And we have to understand that we're all fallible. We all can make less than correct decisions that end up hurting somebody unintentionally. Mm-hmm. And yes, there needs to be accountability. Yes, we need to move forward. But our society is just saying oh, well, cut them out. That's it. And then that's the end of it. There's no resolution. And we know from studies, right, Dr. Abby, it shows that openness in adoption is the best thing for the child as long as it is safe to do so. So we know these things about continuing relationships, and yet still persistently we're told, no, don't do that. The risk is too much. And at the end of the day, as an adoptee, I look at it and I see my adopted parents. They have hurt me on many occasions. They hid my adoption for what? But again, it's very personal, who needs to forgive who and what the obligation here is. And I think, frankly, the person that you owe is Carly. Mm-hmm. So, moving forward, is there anything that you'd want Carly to know about this?
Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
I think the only thing that I'd want her to know is that nothing I've ever done has meant to hurt her. or upset her or further make her life more difficult. And that everything that I've done has been, I've been thinking about her and what's best for her, and I know it may not come across that way, but that was the intentions behind everything that has happened. And I think my biggest thing that I would want her to know is just to please just follow your intuition and do not, don't self-betray for the sake of other people's comfort, and to just make sure to follow your intuition, what you feel is right, and don't be afraid to hurt anyone's feelings. You don't owe anyone anything. You owe everything to yourself, and I don't know what that looks like for you, but just to continue following that path and trust your instincts and trust your intuition. And me and Catelynn will always be here when or if you're ready. So, and that we love you and we always wanted you. So, yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Do you think that now, having gone through all these ups and downs, that you might seek out an adoption competent therapist to kind of help support you guys in this next leg of your journey?
Yeah, I've already I messaged my therapist right away when all this stuff happened, and I realized that, like, okay, let me kind of self-reflect here and figure out why this happened and why all this stuff occurred the way it did. And so I think, how, I mean, you've looked for adoption competent therapists, and it's hard to find. They say they are, and then I had a couple where and maybe this was wrong, but I kind of just tested the waters with language and see what they would say. And, and if they came back with kind of that same society narrative of well, whatever, I'm like, oh, I don't think you're really adoption competent. But I mean, the therapist that I have currently seems to be okay. But I wouldn't be opposed to finding someone more really, adoption competent in the level that I need it.
I would say that the first thing to do, it's very hard to find an adoption really informed therapist. It really is hard. But the first thing to ask, or at least my foundational ground rule, is that we both have to agree that adoption is trauma. And as long as we can start from that starting point, we at least have a place to start. But often that's not the starting point.
That's actually a great point, because I was telling Melissa before you joined, me and Kate were that, it took 7 years after placement, and multiple professionals that we talked to after placement, and it took 7 years for an inpatient therapist at a facility to tell us that it was trauma. So my internet's
you must really live in the middle of in some of the areas where I live, because I live in Pennsylvania, it's very foresty, so the cell service cuts out for 20 minutes from one drive to another town. So I totally get it.
I'll say, just since we have space, that the fact that when you said, you can come back from this, the thing that he said was kind of separated his celebrity from his human person, and said that's not what my intent is. And I really want to commend him on doing that, because what's most important to him is not the celebrity, but really just his human, being, his human kindness, his integrity. And that was really great to see, great to hear.
Yeah. And I asked because that has that's a question that people are wondering, and I think they're positioning it as all they care about is fame and spotlight, so they like the drama and stuff like that. And I think just many people just forget to think of birth parents as human and see things. Moving forward, what kind of support would you suggest for birth parents who are still struggling with a closed adoption?
Adoption-informed therapists, 100%. Talking as much as we can. I think silence is really, it's a killer of all things good. I was talking with Lynn Zubov, who has the preliminary exploration on adoption study. And one of the things that she said to me was, I talk about my birth parent, being a birth parent all the time, and I've never met a birth mother. And when I thought about it, I was like, wow, I have talked about it openly for like decades. And I've only had one person, and it wasn't for about 10 years after she had met me that she finally said, I'm a birth mother too. And so like openness, talking, find a way to talk about your experience, because when we don't talk about it, it eats us up. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was watching Tyler and Catelynn talk was that trauma, when you have trauma at a certain age, often parts of your brain get stuck in that age. And so if you think about them reacting to those messages, it almost sounded like they reacted from their 16-year-old selves and not from their grown selves too. And so that's another thing to think about, is that effect as well.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Abby was just saying.
It's what it is.
I apologize.
Abby was just saying that the trauma that you guys just went through can really affect like how you react to things now. And I think that is very relevant to this conversation, because it's just multiple layers there. And we were just kind of going over some things that you guys can do, like moving forward with the adoption competent therapist. And what else did you suggest, Abby? Oh, wait, no, speaking.
Yes,
You're talking
about vulnerability and speaking. Absolutely. I was telling Melissa that birth parents don't speak up. We don't admit, we don't self-identify. It's just a thing. The shame is so real. And so you having this platform and speaking for and showing us that it's okay to speak up and talk about our experience is really important. And appreciate that.
Well, I mean, like I said,
you think
everyone just kind of giving me the space to do it, because it's hard to find the space that feels good or safe enough to do so.
Yeah. Do you think them speaking out as birth parents, because like honestly, I haven't seen many. Like I know a few that do it in the adoption space, but outside of that, and like the wider media and society, like I feel like you guys are one of the first like birth parents that are really taking this step to talk about it in this way. How do you think that impacts the adoption community, Abby?
Yeah, it allows it to stay adoptive parent heavy. It allows the narrative to stay with adopted parents. And so it hurts all of us. It hurts adoptees. It hurts birth parents that we aren't given the space and the freedom and the lack of shame to speak. And I've been speaking forever about my relinquishment, because for me, that it was freeing. It's freeing to be able to talk about it. It's freeing to be able to like have all of me be known and be authentically myself. But I do think that it's hard because that narrative is not positive for why I relinquished. So I was a teenager.
Do you think there's any benefits to the child hearing from their birth parents' experience, even if it is very difficult?
I think there's a benefit to adoptees hearing from any birth parent's experience, whether it's their own or someone else's. The response I've gotten from my story and from adoptees hearing about my relinquishment has been so positive, and has allowed them to look at their own closed adoption from a different lens, with more empathy and grace and understanding for their birth parents, but also for themselves.
Yeah, I've actually gotten a lot of great messages throughout the years from adoptees who will say, you know, you were the first story that actually allowed me to look at what my, birth parents might have went through. I've had a lot of adoptees write me and say that for the first time ever, you watching your story gave me the curiosity to kind of explore my own fog and end up leading them out of it. And I thought that was like, that's the best thing ever. Yeah. That I can at least throughout all my grief and all my mistakes, in being vulnerable and sharing the relinquishing journey that I've been on, is actually helping adoptees like my biological daughter. Like I can't ask for anything more than that. So I think there's a lot of power with vulnerability and sharing our story. And I think a lot of people who aren't involved in adoption will look at it and say that I'm exploiting and that I'm doing the wrong thing. And that, it's important though to kind of push back that, because I think that has to do with society's narrative again. So I think it's important to kind of push that back and keep continuing to do it regardless of what people not inside the triad think of it.
Yeah, and I think what's key here is that unless, like, we need to talk about the intricacies here and the flaws in the system and the lack of support, because if we don't, nobody's ever gonna fix it. We're just gonna, keep putting a blanket over it, ignoring it, and moving on, and just like seeing adoption as a solution. And then we have birth parents who are struggling. We have adoptees who are struggling. And it leads to very unsafe situations. Mental health can deteriorate pretty quickly. And I think my question for other people who think you or other birth parents or even adoptees should keep quiet about complicated experiences is why? How is that helping children?
It's not helping children. It's making adults more comfortable, but it's not helping children.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is that it is only helping the adults feel better about it. And I feel like if we're really truly going to make and keep this child-centered, that we can't be worried about the adults and how they're feeling and how they're affected. And maybe not worry about it, but let's not prioritize it. I think the adoptee should be prioritized. And I also feel like there's a huge difference with birth parents sharing their story, because a lot of people will say that, I'm doing the wrong thing for my daughter by sharing the story. And I've heard the opposite from people who are actually involved in the triad. And they say, listen, like, I would have given anything to have literally watched my birth parents and how they felt in real time after visits that we've had. And so those kind of things being documented on TV, some people can say that it's exploitation. I look at it like a transparent lens for an opportunity to educate and to learn more and get a deeper understanding. And so that's how I feel about it.
Abby, when you share your story as a birth parent, obviously you're not a reality TV star.
No.
That's in the media. But, as a normal, everyday citizen, how would you say the reaction has been by people in your life, strangers?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for calling me normal. No, the reaction has been really positive. And I think that part of that is I didn't start sharing my story very publicly, like online and social media, until I could share it from a very healed place. And so I share it from a very balance of this is the good. These are the things that happen that are great from my adoption. Nothing really great from relinquishment, but these are the great things that happened from my adoption. Mm-hmm. And these are the things that I'm really critical about. And because I share it from that really balanced place, that people are able to hear my message really well. I'm also very, very honest about it and have done a lot of reflection on just my journey. I mean, it really wasn't until about 5 years ago that I realized that I had been coerced into placing my child. And when I think about that, 5 years ago, I was like 48 years old. I relinquished at 17. How in the world did I not see the coercion? And that's because I was taught not to, because I didn't grieve. And because 2 weeks after I relinquished my son, my parents sent me to track camp. Like, that was my, get over it kind of thing. And so people are really, really responding to the vulnerability from which I tell my story, and from really the healed place and like the balance.
If you don't mind me asking, are you in contact with your child?
So my son is one who goes in and out, and he's currently no contact with us right now. It's been about a year. But yes, but I think that this is probably the 3rd round of no contact in the 15 years since we reunited.
Yeah. I think that is very normal, like you mentioned.
It is.
But also, I feel like we don't talk about it enough from the other end of birth parents also withdrawing. And that's something else I saw people talking about, like, they didn't see Carly for a year or two, or whatever it was. Like, why do they care now? And it's this whole emotional thing that it's complicated. You can't say, like, you didn't want contact then. Okay, guess you lost that forever. Like, how is that a good option for anybody here?
Yeah, no, I went through a lot of just really hard times with our reunion, specifically dealing with my son's adoptive parents. Those were the times when I withdrew, when I felt jealous. I was, really, really just torn up by the fact that they got to watch him grow up, that they got to do all of these things that I didn't. And there were times for my own sanity that I had to withdraw from that. I just couldn't deal with it. And I think that that's just as normal as an adoptee, seeing the family, the relationships that they could have had on their biological side and needing to step back. It's a two-way street. There's just so much loss.
Would you say that it's typical for the birth parents to also, wave back and forth between contact?
Yeah, I think that it's not as typical because we've been, so desperate to find it. But I think that it is just, yes, absolutely. The feeling of wanting to withdraw is definitely there, especially when you're dealing with an adoptee who comes in and is feeling like, my son has said to me, you abandoned me. And I know that, like, I was 17, I was coerced. But yes, I did. And so it's hard to hear those words. And so, yes, I think it is normal for birth parents to also withdraw because it's hard. It really is.
Yeah, I've actually never experienced like the desire to withdraw at all. I think, Melissa, I think what you're speaking of, I think, and which is, I'm glad you kind of brought that up because there's so many like rumors and conspiracy theories about people believing what's true or not.
Yeah.
But so after she turned 5, they went from every year visit to every other year visit. So it was always, so from the age of 6, it was always saw her at 8 and then saw her at 10 and then saw her at, 12. And so the thing you're thinking about, I think, is when, after Catelynn's miscarriage, and her mental health went totally down the drain and she went in and out of treatment centers, for a few years. That was the time that we didn't send gifts like our normal scheduling was or had been. But we were always talking to Brandon and Teresa. We were always communicating with them during that time. We have never gone just like completely no contact at all. I think what you're referring to is there was a scene, I know what you're talking about, where they, Dawn mentions, how have you been with communicating with gifts? And I think people get the communicating with gifts part confused with communication just in general. We were always communicating with them. It's just that we were going through so much personal stuff with our family and Catelynn's postpartum and her miscarriage and all that kind of stuff. Really a mental health crisis. And so I think that was a time that we were inconsistent with sending gifts, but we were always communicating. And so I never actually felt the need to withdraw. But I know what it feels like to not be the one to communicate because the adoptive parents can be sensitive and I have a tendency to like sometimes not have a filter. So Catelynn has taken a lot of the responsibility as far as communication back and forth goes. And so I know what that feels like to be like, listen, I'm not the best person to be talking with them right now, so I would remove myself in those kind of situations. But yeah, I guess I never heard of the I think what you said, Abby, was really important about being honest about being jealous is a real feeling, and jealousy creates kind of it creates a shame feeling in a cycle that kind of creates you to do things that you really wouldn't normally do or things that you might regret. And so I think that's one thing that I have rarely heard from a birth parent speak about how, they are jealous. And I think that that's natural because how can you not be jealous when you're seeing, them raise your child? And especially in situations like I think we had where we were so young and felt that we had no choice. And I think that like when people talk about kind of coming out of your own fog as a birth parent, like, that was, being grateful or you're so selfless. It's like, yeah, I was selfless because I was desperate though. So, that's a totally different feeling that, being selfless is described as a great thing, but when you're selfless because you feel desperate,
fear.
Yeah, it's fear. And so I think that was, I commend you for kind of saying it out loud that birth parents are jealous. We can't help it,
It makes sense. It happens from the other side. My adopted mom has told me many times, like, oh, I'm jealous. I never wanted to lose you. These feelings are normal. Like, we all are going to, like, it's like growing up with a sibling. Even if you have the best life ever, at some point in time, you're going to resent them. You're going to get mad at them. Legally, you guys are technically not their family. But ethically and morally, and the reality for the adoptee is, like, you will always be part of her family, whether she wants contact or not. There's a very nice picture book called My Family Tree Has Roots by an adoptive parent. She talks about the child asking, like, well, how do I describe my family? Because the family tree assignment. And so finally the little girl is like, my family tree has roots. My birth parents are the roots that I came from. So even though they're not in my life, they still have impacted me and will continue to impact me. Like, their legacy, their culture, these different aspects are there. And we know nature versus nurture, like that, like, development is very complicated. And like, my brother and I grew up in the same environment, completely different life trajectories. And like right now, like, I'm considered the ideal adoptee. I got married, I graduated college. My brother's currently finishing out a sentence in incarceration, and he struggled with substance abuse. Again, something my parents were never aware that adoptees were more likely to struggle with. And if we had more awareness of this, I feel like then we would have more people coming together, more support systems, more programs for adoptees.
Let's even roll it back further than that. Had Tyler and I been aware of that at relinquishment, we may have made other choices, even beyond the adoptive parent being. If I had had actual informed consent, where I understood all of the trauma and, the percentage times more likely to commit suicide, the addiction, all of those things, I would have never chosen that for my son.
And I have to piggyback what you said, because I think the moment that I read this study from a genealogist and a neuroscientist talking about the maternal separation trauma, and honestly, that would have been all it would have taken for me. And
absolutely.
And me and Kate both agree that if we would have been aware that, pre-verbal trauma is inevitable and it is, like, guaranteed for the adoptee as a baby to experience, I mean, I would have been like, that's it. Like, that would have been enough for me to be like, no, I'll go home to my juggy parents and I will figure this out, I think it's super important. Like I said, education, that's the whole point of why we're doing this, is because that stuff needs to be talked about. And I also, as far as adoptive parents go, like, they have to deal with their own jealousy, like you said, Melissa, about, like, they're never going to share that genetic biology with them. And that, I know that has to come with an emotional cost and labor that, but I will say, I think that people will give a lot more grace and understanding to adoptive parents' fears and insecurities. And then when a birth parent voices those fears or insecurities, we're immediately shut down and definitely not shown the same amount of grace that adoptive parents get. So,
mm-hmm. And I just want to remind listeners too, when you are talking about the adoptive parents, you obviously know that's going to be personal to the child. But when you talk about the birth parents, this is something that Carly is going to be able to see. So every comment that people leave, and like, I understand having an opinion on things, but they also need to realize that this is impacting the child too. So, like, they are complicit in a type of harm. And I think that's just, like, part of the accountability here that we never really get to address.
Well, yeah, I think you bring up a good point that it's actually very, I've noticed even in the TikTok adoptee community, that it's very hypocritical for them to, voice all this concern and all this support for an adoptive parent and say great things about them, but it's totally justified to say bad things about the birth parent because they believe that, oh, well, they don't care if I talk about their birth parents. It's like, well, no, if you think and have the logic to understand that talking about their adoptive parents negatively will impact them, you have to know that talking negatively about their birth parents is also going to impact them. And I also feel like how irresponsible, because in a way you have a responsibility to let the adoptee know that whatever their feelings are is valid. And so if they're constantly reading the opposite of what they feel, like, oh, I should hate them, I should be only grateful for my adoptive parents, I should be mad at my birth parents, they're not going to feel the safety or the security to say the opposite of what the narrative in the comment section is.
The whole thing in the beginning where you guys were concerned because you were hearing this information where your child was potentially struggling. It's very plausible and that could have been the case. Even if Brandon and Teresa made all the right decisions, never made a mistake, the child could still feel a sense of obligation and guilt and frustration, confusion, just by, the situation being in the limelight.
Yeah. I think people don't really get that part. They're kind of just, and like I said, I think that has to do with just the society's death grip on that. The adoptive parents are amazing, adoption's beautiful, birth parents shut up, adoptees be grateful. And that's like what, like those things are, if all those things are done, everyone's happy. It's the moment that we all come out and say the hard stuff that everyone gets really strong, fiery opinions about, which can be damaging.
Good. I want to add that the adoption narrative hangs in the air the same way that all of the isms hang in the air, racism, sexism, all of those things. And it's something that we all breathe. And so it's part of all of our psyches. And so when you are thinking about commenting or speaking on someone else's situation, just take a second to really think critically about what you've learned and what you've heard and what you've inhaled about adoption and the adoption narrative. And take a second to think for yourself that there are all sides of the story. Again, I'll say over and over again, you can't have too many people love a child. And so think about the fact that birth parents love their children just as much as the adoptive parents do, in 99% of the cases. And so really think through that critically and just think before you speak, before you comment.
100%. And we talked about jealousy of adoptive parents and birth parents. Like my mom really struggled with that. And it was one of the things that I heard from my own parents that I should feel grateful. I should, not even think about where I came from. It doesn't matter. And so that it is a fear. Even if my mom never said that to me, and I heard it from other people that potentially is how she feels, not only would I feel bad for her and guilty and sad and frustrated and mad, as a child without any support, typically, what kind of support do the typical adoptees go through? To my knowledge, it usually isn't until something bad happens that they are put into therapy or for challenging behaviors. Before that, they're seen as the typical child who's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when they're put into therapy, they're the problem. And so, we can talk about that all day long. One of the things as a therapist I don't do, which is kind of controversial though, is I don't accept insurance. And I do that 100% because I don't want to diagnose an adoptee. I refuse to put that in record that there's a diagnosis when it's just adoption trauma. There is a thing. And until that's in the DSM, I will not diagnose an adoptee as having any kind of personality disorder or any other thing, because you're reacting exactly how you should react to a situation where you had no control.
Wow, that is crazy.
So it's anxiety, it's oppositional disorder, it's reactive disorder, attachment disorder, it's all of these other things, but really you're reacting absolutely how you should react when you've lost everything that grounds you.
Well, we got to get that thing updated because that's why.
There's a lot of things in there that need to be updated.
So many.
But just to continue what we're talking about, support for adoptees, that's one of the things that I'm really excited about this conference that we're all going to be a part of on November 8th in New York City, is the fact that we are raising funds for adoptee and foster youth mentoring. And that has been a vital part of many children's lives that has really helped them. And I've seen so many adoptees whose lives have completely changed just by talking to another adoptee who has been through a similar situation, because I know for me, I didn't meet an adoptee until I was like 25. When was the first time you met another adoptee, Abby?
I was probably 20 something as well. Yeah, I think I was in college. Which is crazy because I was a transracial adoptee, so everyone knew that I was, but still no one disclosed to me.
Yeah, that it's just kind of mind-boggling to think about that. And like, if it's this beautiful thing, if it's like nothing negative about it, like, why wouldn't you want more adoptees to come together and like encourage that? And so that's why I really appreciate that nowadays there are at least like cultural camps, there are different avenues, there are classes that are adopted parents getting. And I just want to mention, like, because like this can seem like, oh, we all hate adopted parents. Like, that's not what it is about me. Like, I just want to be very clear. I love my adopted parents. I am like, my mom is like my best friend. And the thing is just like, we need to work together. And adopted parents, I have seen a change in these past few years. Like in my work, just seeing, I focus a lot in transracial adoption education, and the questions that they have prepared, the work that they're doing, reading books, interviewing people, listening to podcasts, doing everything that they can so they could be prepared for their child. That's something I never saw 10 years ago. Like that was unheard of, let alone in the 90s when I was adopted. So I'd like to ask Abby, like, have you seen more like positive changes in support from adopted parents in your work?
Yes, absolutely. I don't sugarcoat my message at all, and I'm welcoming all of these adoptive parent spaces because they want to hear the truth. They want the lived experience, and not just my lived experience as an adoptee, but also my lived experience as a birth mother. And so just having the platform and the openness to hear what might be difficult is completely different. And I was adopted in 1971, so like none of my parents got none of this. My dad talked about how he got a little conversation about how my hair and my skin might be different. And that's all he remembers getting for any kind of conversation about adoption and what that might mean to our family. So yes, I'm grateful for this openness in the platform and for all the adoptees and birth parents who are speaking up, because it really is opening that conversation.
Well, it's just proof that what we're doing is working. I mean, it may be slow. It's not happening as fast as we want, but this work is super, super important. And that's why, me and Kate just feel so grateful that we were even able to walk into this community with acceptance. I know we have a lot of, oppositions that people don't like us in this community, and I understand that. But I guess to those people, just give us time. Let us show you that we're on your side and we're trying to do what's right, and we're also open to criticism and learning from mistakes and fixing them and doing whatever we can to just kind of get this message and education out there the best that we can.
Yeah, and I think, like Abby said, like that's all you can do. I don't think that like what kind of reparations could you do in this situation? Is like, who are you writing a check to? Who are you apologizing to when there aren't adults that have contacted you? And I think you mentioned like you haven't heard from Carly's parents either. So like, it's just the rumor mill right now, and just random people online who are saying like, oh, well, I heard Tyler apologized to adoptees and admitted to it. And then no one is saying admitted to what exactly, like what did, because we've talked to you and you very clearly stated what have happened.
Yeah. And
do you think anything is missing?
I don't think anything's missing, because I honestly haven't said anything publicly, and I felt like the situation was so, just gritty and not understood. And so I didn't feel the need to do it publicly. I wanted to do it privately, individually, with each person that I had connected with. And I thought that was super important for my own accountability and what happened, and not necessarily as in a way of I'm admitting of what I did. It was more or less like, I understand the impact that this has had, regardless of what's true, what's not true, and that you guys are innocent in the crossfire, unfortunately. So that was my main reason for reaching out privately. But now that I'm doing this publicly with this interview, I feel it's just the kind of the layer that the natural next step to reaching out privately is to do it publicly and let everyone know the truth and what's happening, and just kind of go from there. I don't know really what else to do at this point. Like you said, I reached out to Dawn. I said, can you confirm or deny any of this stuff? I know that Braintrees don't want to talk to us right now, but for this instance, maybe they would want to. And so that hasn't happened yet. So like that even also kind of makes this thing seem really catfish situation weird and not really valid. And, because I feel like I would have heard something by now. But I haven't. So until that happens, I mean, I'm willing to do that. Of course, I'm looking forward to it, to be honest, so we can just kind of close this chapter. But like I said, I'm just here to take accountability and apologize. And, that's all I can do moving forward and learn from it. And honestly, what I'm really grateful for this experience, to be honest, is that it has pushed me to go back to therapy. And it has pushed me to self-reflect about why this would even happen at my age. I'm 33. I'm shocked even at myself that the conversations went as long as they did. And so now I'm reading books on like what the psychology is behind being catfished and like being toyed. So I'm learning a lot. So the blessing in disguise from this is I'm trying to learn more. I didn't realize that catfishing.
Abby, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say. So one of the things when you went off that I mentioned is that when we have really impactful trauma like relinquishment, often our brain gets stuck at that age. And so what I imagine happened is you receive those messages and you're reacting from that trauma of a 16-year-old and not from a grown person's thought process.
But I feel like that's kind of where that awareness, like that's what I'm apologizing for, is because that shouldn't have happened. Like it's my responsibility to heal that trauma. And just because I did this thing at 16 and it may have, stunted me, or it may have maybe, drawn me back to that emotional state of mind or that age, it's not an excuse. And so I'm trying to for me personally, like my curiosity for understanding is what heals me. And so I want to know why I got so wrapped up in this catfish situation. I want to know why my critical thinking skills didn't take over and why this happened. And so that's kind of where I'm also learning about a lot of these online, even with online dating situations, people get like, it's a whole thing. It kind of, the manipulation tactics that people use with wording digitally is strange. And so I'm learning a whole bunch. Trying to,
So I will suggest IFS therapy to kind of get to some of that trauma from the 16-year-old self.
And what is that?
Internal family systems. And so it looks at those parts in you that come up that take over your normal self. So if you think about the movie Inside Out and all of those parts inside of Riley, so one of those parts is that traumatized 16-year-old and what happens when you felt threatened in this situation and felt like you needed to jump up and protect. That was that part of you that came up that was probably different from who you would be in your normal balanced self. And so I would suggest finding a therapist who does IFS.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion. I've never heard of IFS. I've heard like CBT, the feedback one. Yeah. There's all sorts of different ones. And one of the interesting things about like therapy and like psychiatry and like finding the right person is like I tell people who are like nervous about it, it's kind of like speed dating.
It is,
because
absolutely.
Like you're meeting different people, you might click, you might not, and that's okay if one therapist doesn't work for you. Like there's somebody out there who would be a better fit. For parents who are listening, adoptive parents or caregivers who are listening, what kind of support would you suggest that they lean into if their child is struggling or might be experiencing questions about whether or not they want open or closed adoption?
Yeah, I love the idea of mentoring, adoptee mentoring, getting someone who has lived experience. Again, always an adoption-informed therapist, support groups, all of those places. We're out there. We are out there in the community now. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. And I think because of COVID, like fortunately, unfortunately, there are a lot of online options now.
So many.
Monthly meetup groups. There are different ones for different cultures. I know there's a South American one. There are so many different avenues that you can go to, and the adoptee community is out there, and it can be very welcoming. And like you said, Abby, earlier, like sharing our stories is very freeing. And I think that all of us have a reason as to why we're sharing what we are and what we want. And I feel like it's not just selfish, like, oh, I just want to complain. Like, that's what people see it as. And it's just like, oh, something bad happened to you. Get over it. And it, like, for many people, there are many adoptees who don't want to talk about their story. And I imagine the same is about birth parents. It's a lot to get into. It's very emotional. And that doesn't mean that it's the right answer for others.
Absolutely. And what we're all looking for is affirmation and community. We're sharing our stories because we want to share for affirmation and community, and for growth.
Mm-hmm. Tyler, is there anything else you want to add or ask Abby?
I mean, first off, just thank you so much for jumping on here and kind of giving that third party, reflection, because I need it as much as I talk to a lot of adoptees, but not all of them are therapists or, adoption competent therapists. So you're very valuable here. I just appreciate you taking the time to just speak with me and be involved in this situation. I really hope you don't get any negative feedback for doing this with me. And if you do, I'm apologizing now. And hopefully that goes away during, the course of all this happening and being released. So, but yeah, I just appreciate you taking the time to just do this. Yeah, very grateful.
Absolutely. And I don't know the situation again, so I haven't seen it, but I'm sorry that you're going through a hard time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abby. Is there anything you want to add about birth parents, trauma, healing, anything?
No, I think we've covered a whole lot. Yeah, and it is real. Yeah, it is. All of it's real, and it's all for every single adoption story. There's a unique experience, and so also remembering that all of these experiences are different, and all of them have a voice and are all valid.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they're looking for your work or like other speaking engagements?
Yeah, easiest is adoptingprivilege.com, and that's the website for my book, but also has links to everything else. So for ways for people to reach out and book me or just come talk to me, or I'm licensed in Texas and Maryland, so anyone who's looking for therapy and is an adoptee or a birth parent, I'd love to hear from you.
What's your book title?
Adopting Privilege.
Okay. Beautiful. So make sure you guys check that out. Again, I just need to plug our conference, Adoption Changemakers, November 8th, 2025. So it's in a few months. We will be raising money for Adoptee mentoring and foster youth mentoring. So we are going to have an array of amazing speakers. We're going to have birth parents. We're going to have adoption competent therapists. We're going to have adoptive parents. I am actually co-hosting it with an adopted parent. And I feel like this is another way that we can give back. We can make progress in this area and just keep moving forward, because that's what we have to do. We just have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, making these tough conversations happen, and just being open with one another. And I hope that's what listeners get out of this, is just understanding a little more openness and understanding and empathy towards adoption situations, and just understanding that it's not just black and white. And I think it would have been a whole other different situation if it was something nefarious and creepy and, like you were asking for money or like physically trying to like get in contact with somebody. Like it wasn't like that. And I think like we need to also like see what things are on a scale and not just throw rocks at you just because you had a very tough time navigating the situation. I think anyone would. And I would have anyone listening also ask, what would you do if you were a birth parent in this situation? How would you react? And if you were the child, what would you want? What kind of support would you want? And again, like we have to put the children first. And I just want to reiterate too, like as an adoptee, I find it very powerful that Tyler and Catelynn and you, Abby, all share your story as birth parents. I do think it's very helpful. It is helping change things. And I think like the more we do this, the more progress we'll make.
Yeah, I actually have one question because I'm not an adoptee and you two are. Considering this public, 16-year-long documentation of post-relinquishing, like what would you like to tell other online creators, give them a little bit of advice of what not to do or what to do when they're making content about our story, which involves Carly?
I think I mentioned earlier, remembering at the forefront that regardless of their opinions on it, you and Catelynn are Carly's parents. You're her biological parents. And even though those ties are legally severed, emotionally, genetically, Carly will always be tied to you. And it doesn't matter if she does want to open adoption or doesn't in this term, because no matter what they're saying is going to impact her. And I think there's a way to add criticism to a situation while also not personally attacking and vilifying, unless you have like 100% concrete proof that something like illegal happened. Like that's a whole other situation. But in situations where these rumors happen, like it's not healthy. I get it. That's a way that people make an income nowadays. But ethically and morally, would you want someone talking about your child's parents that way? I don't think so. And I'm a person where I comment on situations all the time. I comment on media that has happened with adoption, Lilo and Stitch, different things that happen. And I think there's a way to go about it where you're adding your input in the situation without vilifying as well.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I love the answer. I think that mine would probably be different just because content I do is different in that I don't share anything that isn't my own story. I will not share. And that's what I would love for content creators to think about is like, if it's not your story, don't share it. If it's nonfiction and not your story, don't share it. We can comment on as much fiction as we want to, but it's just, you just can't share other people's stories. It's not yours to tell.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Tell Catelynn we said goodbye. We'll be in touch. If there's anything else you guys want to add later on, just let me know. I know Abby recommended not sending all the messages, but Tyler, if you don't mind, just like sending me like a screenshot of all the calls that Catelynn got. I don't need to see the numbers or anything, and then maybe like one or two of the messages, and I won't share it, but just like for me, my peace of mind to see like the concerns that you had reiterated there. I think that it will be helpful just to, when I put out all the content, to have more context too.
Yeah. The phone calls, by the way, it's just going to say no caller ID, unfortunately. But
okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it just shows like a habit, like if she's getting like all these crazy things, like to see your phone blowing up like that, like I feel like that's just
crazy making.
Yeah. And you were 16 when you went on the show. This has been a huge part of your life. You didn't have a typical childhood, and I think that needs to be factored in.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, factored in for you too, as in giving yourself grace.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
It starts there. I mean, you've apologized to the adoptee community, but you've got to do that work inner too. You've got to give yourself grace.
Yeah. I think like moving forward, like you said, you want to keep boundaries and not talk about Brandon and Teresa. I think that's a good step. And like just being willing, like you said earlier, you're willing, if any parent who actually is a parent of a child in this situation reaches out to you, you would be willing to talk to them and apologize. And yeah, I don't really know what anybody else wants from you at this point.
Pound of flesh.
Yeah.
They want my head.
As with all of these social media things, like it just is, and this too shall pass. It really
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, and check out my books from your local library. For more conversations on adoption, check out Adoptee Thoughts on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to learn more about my work, head over to adopteethoughts.com or search Adoptee Thoughts on any social media platform. And remember to keep leaning into the uncomfortable, because that's where real growth happens.